Okay, we're continuing. This is part 6 of How the Catholic Church Built Civilization. And here's the book by Thomas Woods, How the Catholic Church Built Civilization. And this is a painting by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel ceiling, commissioned by Pope Julius, and is the creation of Adam. And it's a very important painting. This is actually the best painting and the most important painting ever in the whole history of the world. What it indicates is man is created in the image of God, as it says in the Bible. And that has a lot of meaning. It means that man, in a sense, is part divine as well as part beast. But it also means, we're like God. We can, perhaps understand his world a bit because we're created in his image. It also means that given man is intrinsically part divine, he deserves natural rights. And the Catholic Church pushed for that more than anyone else. Secular rulers don't care about that. Natural rights mean the rights of the citizen based on him just being human. And it also tells you something. This idea that mankind is a brotherhood. God the Father and mankind are his sons. That God wants sons. And the relevance is he wants us to be happy. He wants us to have a good life. He wants things to be good for us. So he also expects us, the brotherhood of mankind is dependent on the fatherhood of God. Okay, that's an important point. The brotherhood of man is dependent on the fatherhood of God. Because if you don't have that, what you have is other ethnic groups, national groups, religious groups, whatever they are, and they all decide that their group is what matters and everyone else outside of them is a heretic or a scumbag or a lowlife, whatever. And they just, whoever's got the power just brutalizes everybody else. The Catholic Church is great because it says we're all brothers in man by being humans and we should all be good to each other. There's nothing else that does that. The Catholic Church is what brings peace. The Catholic Church is what got rid of slavery. Okay, every country since the beginning of the history of time had slavery, but the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, got rid of it. That's an important point. There's still slavery, okay? And here's what atheism says. Atheism says that mankind is nothing special. It's based on atheistic Darwinism. It says he is just, an ape that talks. He has no intrinsic rights. There's nothing divine about him. And basically, whichever ape has the most power, the most money, in the modern world, power is primarily money, he has the right to make everybody else do whatever he says. The golden rule is he with the most gold controls the world. So that's really the question. Are we created in the image of God and part divine and therefore entitled to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, privacy, free speech, things like that? Or are we just talking primates who must obey our ruler like, a dairy cow must obey a dairy farmer? And it all comes down to that. There's no way around that. Here's just another example of the beautiful art. This is from 1435. And just look how magnificent it is. Can you guess which guild funded this one? This was funded by the Archers Guild, the Descent of Christ from the Cross. And you can see how his body looks like a bow and arrow, and that, the Virgin Mary, his mother, fainting from her sadness, her position echoes his. Okay, it's rather magnificent. This was done in 1435. This is how great the Christian artists are, the Catholic artists are. Rogier van der Weyden and Sandro Botticelli are the two best artists of the 1400s. In my old house, I used to have a picture of that painting on the wall. Okay, now, this painting right here is called Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains. Sierra means like a saw, so the mountain edges are like a saw, their upper part. This is painted by Albert Bierstadt, and he was part of related to the Hudson River Valley School, all these, intensely Christian artists. And they just made the most beautiful landscape paintings ever made in the history of the world. I actually think this is the greatest landscape painting ever in the history of the world. It's magnificent. It's sublime. It's beyond great. It's something like out of a dream. It's so perfect. And that's what it does. That's what Christianity does. We honor God with our art and with our creativity and with our good deeds. And, they've all said that, the most creative, most wonderful artists ever in the history of the world. Michelangelo, Bach, etc., Handel. Okay, here's John Ruskin, and he's the greatest art critic who ever lived. And again, it was in 1853. This painting was made in 1853 by John Everett Millais, one of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. They wanted to go back to a style of painting inspired before the time of Raphael, more religious. Okay, and John Ruskin, if you go to his speech, you can find it on the internet in an English accent, his speech about what is good art. It's magnificent. It's the best art speech ever given. Okay. Here's the Pietà, the sculpture of Michelangelo. And, it's sad, but a lot of times an artist takes a sadness from their life and puts it into their work to some extent. When he was just a young boy, about 7 years old, his mother died. And, of course, he was really sad from that. And in a sense, you get a sense of that here, that, this is Christ in the body of Mary, the Pietà, the Mercy. And it's the greatest statue ever made in the history of the world. It's magnificent, okay? Now, I just want to show you what this modern atheism does. This modern atheism, it's disgusting. It's evil. So modern atheism, it has modern art museums. You shouldn't even call them art museums. They use this to launder, the dinero. And you can see there's just statues of feces. This is a disgrace. Again, if a person from the Italian Renaissance came to the modern world and they saw this, they would say, what is wrong with you people? Are you sick in the head? You allow this to be in your museum? Feces? You are barbarians. You are scum. You are lowlifes. They would not tolerate this, but the modern people, they've been so brainwashed by the public schools, they allow themselves to be degraded like this. This is a major insult that this is in our art museums. This should not be accepted. If I had any power in this world, and I don't, all I got is my little ability to make this YouTube channel, I would not allow this. Feces in the art museum as statuary, and that children come see this and think that this is acceptable behavior, it's disgusting. It's an insult, okay? That's what you get with atheistic Darwinism, mocking the public. The other thing that happens is you get all these fake artists who are piece of crap scumbags, and they get recommended to the public. They'll tell you, oh, Picasso was a great artist. No, Picasso was a scumbag piece of crap. Picasso is a member of the Communist Party. He won awards from the Communist Party. And these sick-in-the-head paintings look like, something done by a schizophrenic patient. That's not good art. This is crap, okay? Here's good art. This is Edmund Langton, okay, chivalry. It's called Godspeed, okay? The woman's wishing her man well when he goes off to battle, okay? That is magnificent art, okay? You could just feel it. You could feel the relationship between the two people there, husband and wife. It's beautiful, okay? That's real art. And everybody knows what I'm saying is true. You could feel it in your heart. It's obvious, okay? And here's Chartres Cathedral, statues of Christian martyrs, and they honor the people who gave their life for serving the church. They said the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, okay? Now here again is Christ in the Last Judgment in the door of the front of Sainte-Chapelle. Okay, and it's full of this everywhere. And this was made by nameless artists. There's one after another magnificent thing. And a lot of the people were illiterate back in those days, and these would tell the stories of Christianity, okay? And they're beautiful, and it's endless, and all the angels, and it goes on and on. It's magnificent. Okay, and here's like the smiling angel. Here's Chartres Cathedral, and they would have water spouts. They would put gargoyles on there, and part of it was a bit of a joke. The Catholic Church has a sense of humor. The idea that the outside world's a rough place, and the church is a sanctuary from all of that, and there's a lot of truth in that. But I also like the fact it has a sense of humor. And here's an even more of the sense of humor of the Christian church. A lot of religions do not have a sense of humor. Christians can handle a joke, okay? This is sort of like, devils are harassing people. And that's a lot of what it's like in the third world. That's a lot of what it's like in the countries where they have an open the BORDER, okay? So it has a sense of humor, and that's a good thing. Create a sense of humor is a good thing. Okay, the other thing is you got the Ten Commandments. It tells people, behave. Don't be stealing to each other. Don't be lying to each other, even though I know a lot of people break that rule. Don't, KILL each other. And, don't steal each other's spouse. It has a lot of good stuff on it. Okay, here's the Last Judgment, and it's a reminder to everybody that they should be good. Someday, Jesus Christo at their time is going to judge them. The good ones go to heaven, and the bad ones go down below, is the story, to purgatory and whatnot. So, magnificent painting, Last Judgment by Michelangelo on the far wall of the Sistine Chapel. The Virgin Mary, Mercy, okay. It's magnificent. And also it teaches people to be good. They should learn that right when they're young. This sort of that structure to the world as a reminder to be good. And then, the chivalry, Knights of Chivalry, King Arthur and the Round Table. It's all magnificent. The legend of King Arthur and everything that goes with it. The idea of, like Sir Galahad, he had to make himself worthy to find the Holy Grail. The healing of the Holy Grail. Lancelot was the best knight, but because he was, Bonk and Guinevere, he was not thought worthy to be the one to find the Holy Grail. And this is God creating the animals, at the beginning of the world. And the idea was the God of Genesis was a reasonable God, a logical God, and therefore he created a reasonable universe, and it's promoted the development of science. Okay, and like Thomas Wood said, why did Western civilization develop science to such an advanced level beyond all other civilizations ever in the history of the world? Because it had so much support for reason, for free inquiry, and for debates, like the Bible, 11:21, wisdom. Okay, here then is a picture of Quo Vadis, St. Peter. This is from the novel Henry Sienkiewicz. Quo Vadis Domine means, my Lord, where are you going? And this is the vision of St. Peter when he was fleeing Rome as the Christians were being persecuted. And Jesus said to him, look, I'm going back to Rome because you betrayed your people. And I'm going to go be crucified again. And then, St. Peter said, I'm sorry, Lord. And he went back to Rome, where he was martyred. Okay? And then he's buried under the Vatican. St. Thomas Aquinas was a unifier of faith and reason. He's one of my big heroes. And I try to be a modern Thomas Aquinas, unifying faith and reason because they go together. The Catholic Church has promoted free speech. It still does. Well, the modern Catholic organized church has been infiltrated by the Antichrist and a bunch of other scumbags paid off by the billionaire perverts. So it's not really what it should be right now, but there's still enough good people in it and a lot of good Christians that hopefully can save it someday. The scholastic universities were very academic. In a sense, Thomas Aquinas baptized Aristotle. Okay, the Pope in the old days, all the Catholic, most of the cathedrals were schools, and the Pope sort of ran the school system. A degree at any one of them was good all throughout Europe. If you got one by a monarch, that was only good in their own country. And also another thing was in Europe, property was secure, so that if you invented something, you could keep it. Whereas in a lot of other countries, the rulers would just steal it away from the inventor, so there was no incentive to do anything. Like I said, I knew a bunch of people grew up in communist Eastern Europe and Russia, and tons of the men just became alcoholics because they weren't allowed to do anything. The communist rulers, they just want slaves. They don't want thinking, developing, self-actualizing people. And what I love about it, and why I also say you can't have real science without Christian ethics, because there's always the corporations. They've got all the money, the big drug companies, the big food companies, the big oil companies, and they're always just going to tell everybody, here's the money, give us the results we want, or we'll take your funds away, or we'll get you fired from your university. So Christian ethics say you do what is right in the eyes of God. You don't do it for the money. You don't do it because you're trying to seize power. You don't do it to please some secular ruler, kiss their ass like a puppet. And you don't do it because you want to control the peasants. You want to do what is right to understand God's world and hopefully help people. So that's why you need Christian ethics. And all this medical, surgical bullshitology, all this new technology, in reality, it's about 90% a joke. The public doesn't understand that everything just gets distorted to make money, to run patients through like an assembly line, like widgets. And unless you care about that patient, you have to kind of love the patient. You have to say, I'm going to do right for this person. Because all the pressure is just run them through the system like a widget on an assembly line and make as much money as you can off them. So that's why it has to be that way. I can tell you, I know all the technology, and what I see with technology is they always say when a new piece of technology comes in, oh, it's going to help all these patients. And then they figure out how can we make money off it. When I was a resident, the head guy, this is at Evanston Hospital, I had to rotate through there, and he was a funny guy, and I liked him, but he points to the CAT scanner, and he says, what is that? And so one of the residents goes, that's a CAT scan machine. He says, no, that is a machine to print money. Okay? And what I'm trying to tell you is that's what happens. You can make a CAT scan machine. Yeah, it can save somebody's life. You can diagnose appendicitis, get into the OR real quick. That's wonderful. Okay, but you know what? Most of the CAT scan is going to be used for stuff like screening for lung cancer or things like that. And you're going to get all these follow-up imaging. The old joke is, what's the definition of a healthy person? Somebody who hasn't had a body CT yet. CT means CAT scan. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say. That happens to all the technologies. Now, here's a library that, they first built the University of Salamanca in Spain back in like 1218 AD. This particular room was made a little later in the 1500s, before the printing press. And now, if the book's only in Latin, what I'm trying to tell you is it was the monasteries that made the libraries. It was then the monasteries, the cathedral schools that made the universities. And that's where literacy was preserved and taught and maintained. That's where it all came from. Why do you think the language? Monks and missionaries went to all the countries and they would translate the Bible into the people's language, and everybody wanted to read the Bible. The Bible was the big goal of literacy, and once they could read the Bible, they could read other things. This is what educated people and made them literate, gave them the motivation to become literate. Okay, here's modern science. It's a joke, okay? Look at the so-called, efforts against cancer. What are they? They're a joke, okay? All these university researchers, they have to please the drug company or they can't get funding. If they piss off the drug company and show the drug is bad, then they lose their funding or they'll lose their job, they'll fire them. So they're totally controlled, okay? They're a bunch of puppets. Okay, here's another thing too. You realize how many false papers? In the year 2023, over 10,000 papers were retracted as bogus, okay? That's incredible, those numbers. Think about that. 10,000 papers retracted in 1 year for just being bogus, fake research, because it's all funded by corporations. And then, we talked about how medical education has become bogus. They learn all this stuff that is just pretend. To somebody who doesn't know healthcare and medicine and disease, they think a pre-med studying calculus and physics is impressive. But to somebody who knows it, it has zero relevance. Zero. None. Okay? Like I said, I'm a triple boarded Harvard trained doctor. I don't use any math I didn't know by 3rd grade. Okay? So all this stuff is a waste of time. And in the meanwhile, the joke I tell medical students is the textbook for medical school is this board game. It's called Trivial Pursuits. They know the 10th manifestation of a rare disease. They don't know anything about the common diseases. You ask them what is atherosclerosis. They don't know. What causes diabetes? They don't know. What causes hypertension? They don't know. What causes autoimmune disease? What I'm trying to say is that's what always happens. It's controlled by big money from above that wants to train them to sell drugs. Okay? And that's why, you get a Gulliver like me that really understands disease and knows how to treat people, and then the whole system's like a bunch of Lilliputians holding them down, holding them back. They don't want the proles to be healthy. You don't make money with a healthy prole. You make money off the proles by keeping them fat, sick, and stupid. All right, now here's a painting of, St. Thomas Aquinas, who baptized Aristotle. Oh, and here's a Bible quote I wanted you to have, Wisdom 11:21. Thou hast ordered all things in measure and number and height. And Thomas Woods said of this, the verse was believed to indicate the universe was rational, orderly, and could be largely described by mathematics. Wisdom 11:21, thou hast ordered all things in measure and number and height. So, other religions, like a lot of this Hinduism and stuff, they had this idea of Maya. The world was unknowable, okay? And that led them, to not be that motivated to do science. And it's really kind of just an atheistic philosophy, okay? It was a Christian worldview and the Christian security of property that led it to develop incredible science. And then here is where basically I'm baptizing Ayn Rand because she did so much to promote freedom in the world. So I said, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. Now here is the School of Athens painted by Raphael in 1511, and it's obviously magnificent. And here's what Ayn Rand had to say about Aristotle. Aristotle is the greatest philosopher. That's why Thomas Aquinas loved him so much. He was the greatest of the secular wisdom philosophers, perhaps the smartest guy who ever lived. So he wanted the church to be, get along with him. Okay, so Ayn Rand, here's what she says. If there is a philosophical atlas who carries the whole of Western civilization on his shoulders, it is Aristotle. There's Aristotle in the painting pointing down to the earth saying, be practical. There is Plato pointing up to the sky saying, what about the concept of the perfect forms, the allegory of the cave, and all that? And basically, Plato has come to represent, to a large extent, the Protestant church, okay? Whereas Aristotle, to a large extent, is a big influence on the Catholic Church. Ayn Rand continues, Aristotle may be regarded as the cultural barometer of Western history, wherever his influence dominated the scene. It paved the way for one of history's brilliant eras. Wherever it fell, so did mankind. Aristotle is the father of individualism. That's true. Okay. And the best book on philosophy ever written is called The Cave and the Light, Plato versus Aristotle. It's really about their influence on society, Western civilization ever since. And Aristotle, promoted more of freedom and individualism as the Catholic Church and enjoy life while you can, versus Protestantism is more dogmatic, do what we say or you'll burn in hell. It's like, give me a break. You're kind of a pain in the butt. It's kind of bleak, They don't have typically any significant statuary in their churches, hardly any art in their churches. They do have some great musicians, obviously. They had some magnificent composers, including Bach. And they started getting better with art in the Victorian Renaissance and the Catholic revival of the 1800s in England. Okay, but anyways, there it is, magnificent painting. By the way, you might notice that painting behind me, the School of Athens. And what's wonderful about this painting is it shows the Catholic Church appreciation for magnificent art, appreciation for most of the people in the painting are the great philosophers and scholars and scientists of ancient Greece. Archimedes, Euclid, etc. There's Socrates debating something with Alcibiades. There's Raphael painting himself into it. All these other great. There's Michelangelo. There's Diogenes. Okay, now here is Copernicus, and Copernicus was like a deacon of the Catholic Church, and he's the one who first sort of put forth in a solid way the heliocentric theory of the world, that the sun is in the center of the earth and the earth revolves around it. This painting is by Jan Matejko. He's a magnificent Polish artist, absolutely magnificent. I gave talks about him. I also gave talks about Catholic, where did science come from? The modern scientific method comes from the Catholic Church. That's well known. Anybody who studies history knows that. Galileo is the only thing you hear about the church and science, and the church overreacted to him. Galileo was mocking the Pope, and the Pope overreacted. That was wrong, but that's the only criticism you'll hear. In the modern world, it's like most of science is fake, Galileo was one guy who they overreacted to, put him on home house arrest, The modern scientific world is totally controlled by big money. They get professors fired from universities if they criticize their drugs. Almost everything they pay for is about fake. I don't even take it seriously. Anything funded by a corporation, you can bet it was set up to get what the corporation wanted. It's always bogus. Very little of use is funded by those places. Oh, another thing too, if you want to see something interesting, there's 35 craters on the moon named after Jesuit priests. This is all stuff from the book from Thomas Woods. 35 craters on the moon named after Jesuit priests. I would also tell you from my own, just looking around, go to Wikipedia and look up Catholic Church clergy that were scientists. There's tons of them, Science came from the Catholic Church. It started the universities. It started the cathedral schools. For many hundreds of years, it dominated astronomy, like with the Jesuits, for example. The Pope was in charge of, college degrees all over Europe, And then other great scientists were Christians. Here is Newton, Newton during 1665, Anno Mirabilis, the miracle year. He went home to his mother's place in Woolsthorpe, and he just sat around thinking, doing research. He discovered calculus. He discovered, understanding of gravity. Here's some quotes by Newton. Well, here's first of all a quote about him by Professor Alan Kors, who gives a course on these days, on that historical period. Newton inspired the scientific community. Newton had shown that the universe was knowable. About half of his work and his writing was about the Bible. Newton was a religious fanatic. Here is some of Newton's quote. He who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks, has to believe in God. I have a fundamental belief in the Bible as the Word of God, written by those who are inspired. I study the Bible daily. All of my discoveries have been made in answer to prayer. Atheism is so senseless. When I look at the solar system, I see the Earth at the right distance from the sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light. This did not happen by chance. So that's just typical way they talk. And here's another one. This is Kepler, who figured out that the orbits were not perfect spheres and they did not have epicycles. They were elliptical. He lived from 1571 to 1630, so a little bit before Newton. And so here's some of the things he says. He said, The science is the process of thinking God's thoughts after him. The laws of nature are within the grasp of the human mind. I am merely thinking God's thoughts after him. The chief aim of, say, hold on a sec, Holmes. Can you wait? Okay. I am merely thinking God's thoughts after him. The chief aim of studying the external world is to discover the rational order and the harmony imposed on it by God, which he reveals to us in the language of mathematics. The wisdom of the Lord is infinite. The heavens declare the glory of God. It does not matter if my book finds its reader in 100 or even 1,000 years. Has not God himself waited 6,000 years for a human mind to be capable of gazing on his celestial spheres with understanding? Johannes Kepler from his book about the harmony of the world. Okay, so that's the typical science. That's who was doing the science. It was all the devout Christians. So now you'll hear modern idiots say, oh, religion and science should be separate. That's nonsense. You have to commit to telling the truth and doing what's right, and it takes Christianity to get that to happen. If you think that's not true, take a look at the science in the last 100 years, and you will see it gets more and more and more corrupt as it moves farther away from God. It becomes a joke. Okay, now here's an open Bible, okay, painted by Vincent Goh. And the Ten Commandments are in there. Here is Thomas Jefferson, the great genius of the founding of America, and another brilliant genius, Ben Franklin. And, Adams was a good guy, but he wasn't a genius like these two. Okay, so anyways, Ben Franklin sort of proofreading the Declaration of Independence. This painting is by John Trumbull. America has the greatest founding fathers of any country ever in the history of the world. America was founded as a Christian country. Over 98% of them were Christian. Back in those days, too, the pastors were allowed free speech. They didn't have this BS 503 exempt rule, which, basically doesn't allow them to speak. And they all used to have prayer meetings in the same buildings where they would legislate, okay? And that's why it was the greatest country, because it was founded as a Christian country on Christian ethics, and that's the only thing that'll hold it together. Christianity, laissez-faire capitalism, and the Constitution. That's what gives you a free country. This is the Constitutional Convention, all right? And then I'll show you, here's some guys too. They will tell you. This is Charlie Kirk, this is David Barton, two great experts on the founding of America, and they'll tell you it was intensely Catholic. Thomas Jefferson, when you actually read about him, was a religious fanatic by modern standards, okay? David Barton wrote an entire book about him. And now just for comparison, I want you to see this. The French Rev was a joke, okay? The French Rev was pretty much a prelude to the Soviet Revolution in 1918 in Russia, okay? Look, here's what happens whenever you have atheistic stuff. It always ends up in mass this-you-know-what. Things like the guillotine. 50,000 French people lost their heads. That's what you get with atheism. That's what you got with the Soviets, okay? They bumped off 65 million Christians in Russia, all right? So here is, it's a great novel by Charles Dickens. Okay, so that's the end of this part of how the Catholic Church saved civilization. I hope you found this helpful.